Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Wiren from NUS Overseas Colleges. Welcome to NUS Giving Webinar Series. On behalf of NUS Development Office and NUS Overseas Colleges, thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few items so we will know how to participate in today's event. In the hour-long session, our panel speakers will be sharing their stories, followed by a 10 to 15 minutes Q&A at the end. Do remember to pin the main screen on the Zoom meeting to view the discussion. If you are joining this event on a listening mode and have a question during the presentation, please type them in the chat box and we will bring it up during the Q&A session at the end. Please also note that we will be recording this webinar. On our panel today, we have 4 NUS alumni entrepreneurs. Our moderator is Ms. Audrey Tan, a serial entrepreneur. She will be joined by our speaker, Mr. Lim Chong Ti from Waterroom, Mr. Ong Tian Chang from Yona, and Mr. Lee Zihan from Bagosphere. They'll be sharing their respective startup journeys and how they deliver positive social impact to communities while facing the constant pressure of achieving investment returns. Before I hand over to Audrey, I would like to take this opportunity to introduce her to you. Two-time social entrepreneur and a fellow of the Edmund Hillary Fellowship, Audrey has spent most part of her working life empowering people of all ages and genders through financial literacy and independence. To kick off the session, I would like to invite her to share a little bit about her own startup story. Audrey, please.
Thanks, Weiren. And good afternoon to all of you today for joining us. I'm Audrey, the co-founder of Flamula and Circles of Angels. A little bit about myself before I begin to introduce our panelists this afternoon. My entrepreneurship journey started almost 10 years ago when I was in Silicon Valley with the NUS NOC program. And truly it was a life-changing experience because what happened post NOC was I came back with a startup, and the startup being Playmula. So I really have so much to be grateful to NUS for this really life-changing experience for me and myself and the many people that I've worked with. And as a startup, as a social enterprise who started almost 10 years ago, our mission really is to enable young people, children, and their families to really build good financial resilience and emotional resilience in their lives. So we do that through a lot of programs, a lot of education and learning, a lot of the creative arts as well. And most recently, in my recent times in my journey, ended up also working with the UNICEF, also to begin looking at how social entrepreneurs can really begin to trace and track their impact in a way that can create more transparency and more accountability around the financing space. So we also utilize blockchain technologies in the process. I'm a little bit of a geek, so I'm in a comfort zone today with social innovators whom I'm really looking forward to really learn more about their stories. So without further ado, let me introduce them very briefly. And our entrepreneurs today will also share a little bit about their stories and join us on this journey. And we encourage you to have fun. At the same time, if you've got any questions, feel free to also put them in the chat box. So to start us off, I'll get Chong Ti to introduce himself, share a little bit about his story, where he's come from, what impact he's all about, what he's created in his journey. Chong Ti, please.
Hi everyone, I'm Chong Ti, and first of all, I want to say that I'm very privileged to be invited over here together with Audrey, Tian Chang, and Jihan, fellow social entrepreneurs who have been hitting the road since a long time ago. So I'm just a little bit of background about me. I'm from the Faculty of Civil Engineering, right? So my specialization is environmental engineering. So I've always been kind of a water geek, long time ago. When I founded Waterroom, I was a student in NUS. And Waterroom is basically a water innovation social enterprise that develops portable water filtration solutions that's catered for disaster relief as well as the rural places. So we design community water filters. They are very lightweight. You can carry it around, but yet it's able to produce safe drinking water for communities of up to 100 people. right? Each system that we develop can be used in places without electricity, places without infrastructure, and it was really built in mind to be able to provide, universal basic access to clean water. Um, I actually started this together with friends, right? And I was able to materialize some of our ideas into tangible products through NUS Enterprise as a platform. And I'm just very thankful that I was able to bring this solution to the market. And since then, we have impacted over about 100,000 people. Yeah, so our journey is really to improve the living a livelihood of people on the ground. And yeah, I will be happy to share more, along the rest of my 10 minutes.
Thanks, Chongti. And Tian Chang, would you like to share a little bit about your story, your journey?
Hi, so my name is Tian Chang. You can call me TC for short. Mechanical engineering, I think I graduated in 1/3 December. And I'm one of two co-founders at Yona. At Yona, we design, we build, and we deploy cargo drone infrastructure systems to enable the last 100, or actually we've gone to 200 kilometers transport of rural healthcare. So we carry saline bags, blood products, vaccines, and all the related accessories. So the impact at Yona is best described when we get our jobs done well. Children stop dying of things that are easily preventable, vaccinable, or mothers stop bleeding to death in the process of trying to give birth to their children. And I think that's one of the things that we yearn for, to see children stop dying of simple reasons, that actually quite preventable. Before Yona, I was working in another startup company that deals underwater wireless modems. And then before that company, I started a team in NUS. They are known as the Bumblebee team. They are a competitive underwater robotics team. And then before that, I was in NOC Beijing, working on a company that's pretty much a quant shop. So she wanted to be the BlackRock of China. And actually, it was that episode that kind of okay, I'm not going to go the normal route. In fact, after I graduated, the only resume I sent was to SpaceX. But unfortunately, they couldn't take me in because of regulations. So yeah, NOC really emboldened me in many, many ways. Sometimes in ways I don't even know. Yeah.
Thanks, TC. Indeed, very paradigm shifting. I think for many of us, it was life-changing experience. Might be a little bit of an understatement too. And Jihan, welcome, Jihan. I'd love to hear your story as well.
Thanks, Audrey. Hi, everyone. My name is Zihan, and I'm the CEO of Bargosphere. We are a human skills workforce development company, presently headquartered in the Philippines. We train low-income, unemployed youth to accelerate their career readiness and career growth. And in short, we like to say that we are humanizing the future of work. We teach things like communication skills, teamwork, leadership, and the biggest skill gap that we see today, as reported by organizations and leaders of organizations, is that the skill gaps are no longer just about tech skills or digital skills. They are now human skills, things like empathy, ability to listen well, understand, forging human connections. And as Jack Ma like to say, it's no longer about having the IQ and this EQ, right? You need to have LQ, love quotient. So we, as an example, last year we trained about 2,000 youth. We operate in 3 cities in the Philippines. We have about an 85% employment rate. We're able to increase student incomes by 200 to 300%. And also because we provide motivated and skilled talent, we have helped companies save a lot of money in reducing the attrition rate, and basically help them grow much faster as well. So Bargosphere has been founded sometime in 2012 with me and 2 other also NOC alumni. We're all NOC alumni. My background is engineering science. I specialize in nanotechnology. So it's a far cry from what I'm doing now. My parents still ask me, why do you study engineering for? That's another story, but long story short, 3 of us, 3 co-founders, we're all NOC alumni. I went to Stockholm. I was working for a biotech company, and my 2 other friends went to Shanghai. And we met each other after our NOC experience. I'm one of those fortunate few that went to 2 NOC programs. So first to Stockholm in 2008, 2009. And the experience was, as the rest as mentioned, pretty transformational. I was not only involved with, the startup I was working with, but I was involved with other stuff that I was very passionate as well, like social entrepreneurship. So I co-organized a social entrepreneurship forum with the Royal Institute of Technology in Sweden. And I just got really inspired by the stories that I hear from other social entrepreneurs working in Africa and globally. And so I came back, I went to NOC. I can still remember very clearly that, I told them that I want to go to India. I want to go to India NOC because I found out that I have some friends who were interning at a social enterprise in India. So I said, I don't want to miss that. Like I want to get my hands dirty with a social enterprise. And so I went through the whole process again. I went through all the interviews again, and was very fortunate to go through, get through, and get the chance to go to NOC India. That was a much shorter version. I didn't go for the 6-month one, but now there's no NOC India, I think. But back then there was one. I went for a few weeks where I was interning with a social enterprise. So one thing that I've learned is, NOC was really very supportive. I mean, it was not one of those things where it just have to box you up into a category where you do this, do that. But if you have something that you're genuinely passionate about, there's a lot of flexibility in terms of what they could support you with.
Perfect. Thanks, Chihan. Yeah, so it's very diverse, our experience from different corners of the world. And one thing that I learned in my journey in NOC also was looking at how the entrepreneurs I work with as part of our, our internship, were that they were very focused on problem solving, right? And coming up with solutions. And listening to the three of you today as well, there's also a very clear need that you're tackling in some of the space of social impact. And perhaps let's go a little bit deeper. Chong T, share with us also a little bit, what were the initial turning points that really convinced and motivated you to say, okay, this is something I need to put my life behind, right? Because for social entrepreneurs, we choose a path that's a bit less trodden, but very difficult, very hard path, but it could be a good alternative, right, to a corporate kind of lifestyle. Why did you choose this path?
Yeah, I think it started off with my sense of adventure and curiosity. So even back before I was in university, I enjoy backpacking, right? So I like traveling. But as you know, like when you're a student, you usually travel on a budget, right? So I like traveling to countries like Thailand, Cambodia. Back then, when the markets are still opening up, you can really go there, maybe within $150, and me and my friends would go down and do some community service and work. So back then I was quite into doing some for OCIP, but I started off by doing more educational based kind of projects. So I will be volunteering in some schools and teaching some kids basic things like writing the alphabets, writing basic words, basic grammar, and yeah, I really enjoyed doing that with my friends. But along the way, I remember one of the most pivotal moments were when, when I was actually teaching in one of the schools. So I remember it being a really, really hot day. And I was just kind of like, walking around and trying to beat the heat by drinking water and all. And I saw this little child like just standing beside the well, right? And that well is beside the river. And because there's a lot of constant flooding around the area, the water in the well is actually green. Oh, this is in Cambodia, by the way, when I was doing one of my OCIP projects. And I noticed, the kids just, drinking the water directly from the well. And I think that really caught me by surprise because, the water itself is very slimy and green, and there's like really like bugs skittering on the surface of the water. It's not something that you expect yourself to drink. And in fact, I didn't even notice that before I actually saw that scene. And, things started falling in place, right? I started realizing, why are there so many students not attending class, right? The class size was half, especially during summertime when the weather is really hot. I see ladies, the little girls, they don't come to class during this period because of a poor hygiene environment in the school. And yeah, people are having chronic diarrhea all the time. When I probe a little bit more, talking to some of the community centers and the village chief, you realize that many people are falling sick because of diarrhea, right? And evidences points to them not having proper things such as water, right? Something that we take granted for, right? We open the taps every day, and we see clear water flowing through our taps, so we don't even feel the pain when we brush our teeth. When we have our first cup of water, we don't even have to worry if it's filtered or not. But over there, it is a very big problem. So I had time to think through as I was studying about what kind of thing I want to do. And I was very fortunate to bump into a group of friends who feel quite strongly about the same things. And that was when we started to develop a very simple membrane, technology that can solve the problem of at least the village I visited before. And yeah, I think from there things start rolling on, right? Me and my friends David and Vincent, we started like building the filter. We started testing things out with the community, and from there we realized that there is like more and more demand, more and more people asking for our kind of solution and giving us feedback and improvements that we can do. And that's how eventually we morph into like a social enterprise. So I would say it's kind of an accumulation of events, right? But I think if I haven't went onto the ground and haven't opened my eyes to some of these realities, I don't think I would have really felt the gravity of the situation when it comes to water.
Got you. So really being grounded, walking the land, and really understanding the pain points, and even co-creating with your users and your customers. And earlier, Chihan, we were also speaking, and all our panelists here spend time on the ground, and especially for you, Chihan, in the Philippines. What led you there, and what also motivated you to do something and to respond to what you were seeing with the needs on the ground?
I resonated with what Chongti was saying about being exposed to the region. Like him and my co-founders, we did all overseas projects, just to get out and make some impact to people. So that exposed me pretty early on during my university days. But I think one of the fundamental, more, I would say, philosophical, personal motivation was upon reflection, of course, right? When we were starting up, it didn't really occur to me. But now that we have done this, we've gone along this journey, upon reflection, I realized that my childhood growing up days was very instrumental in shaping who I was, particularly around my grandmother, who has no education, had no education, and she was bringing me up when I was very young. And the experience with her, and also a particular experience of her bringing me to Chinatown in Singapore to look for work, was pretty, it kind of deeply set into my consciousness. So we were basically just, I was following her. She was going to different restaurants, asking for work, quite desperate. I think at that point, my family was not doing well, and she was looking for work, any type of work. And so after some time, she found a job as a dishwasher, and she was earning very little. She was working 10 hours, 12 hours. I think my sense at that point was that, why is my grandmother, like so tired all the time? And didn't think too much about it, but unfortunately a few years later she passed away from lung cancer. So I didn't have much time to spend with her. But it dawned upon me after some time that that had a lot of big impact to me, because I was very close to her. But at the same time, my reflection was, she's someone who is extremely talented in cooking and taking care of kids. She had no education. She hadn't had a formal job in her entire life. And so there's still a lot of potential, right? I just felt that there was this waste, right? As if she would have born in a different era, like if she was born the time that I was born, I mean, she would have she would have different perspectives. She would have a different opportunities that we would get. The opportunity to go to NUS and go to NOC. These are amazing opportunities. And so that deeply resonated and kind of helped me connect with what I'm seeing around the region. So when I'm in the Philippines and the countryside, it's like Singapore in the 1960s, Singapore in the 1970s. And people are, finding it difficult to make a living. I have students who are working 3-4 jobs, just earning 100 Singapore dollars a month with kids, right? And they have their wives, they have, people working in Singapore, Hong Kong as domestic helpers. And so it's it reminds me of how Singapore was in the past, and how far we have come across, how far we have come. But at the same time, I realized that this is this was an opportunity for me to make an impact, to other people that, I would wish that my grandmother had.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. The word that comes to me is standing on the shoulders of giants, and how our grandparents, our parents really paved the way. So in many ways, I really relate with what you say too. We have been very, very privileged, very, very blessed as well. Yeah. Something to think about with what you shared, with our grandparents also. TC, we spoke a little bit earlier as well about your experience in Papua New Guinea, and it really intrigued me as well with your time there. What did you see, and what caught your heart and your mind to really say, I need to do something, I need to respond?
I think so. One of the things that I saw there on the ground was like hearing about measles outbreak in vaccinated children. So that was mind-boggling, and that occurred to me that actually, even if you got your vaccines wrong, you won't know it until the children hit like 4 or 5 years, when they actually start become susceptible again. That was when I realized, like, okay, so there's really a real problem there. And then the other problem was that, like, when you, like, I've been to Brunei jungles as part of my NS, right? But then when I went to Papua New Guinea, it totally changed my definition of what a jungle is. It was like within a 500-kilometer area, you can have a sense that goes 500 up, 700 down, and it's like, how can terrain be so rugged? So that was the first time that I experienced like what rugged terrain means, and it will never be possible to build any like typical transport infrastructure there. Yeah, so I guess those were the two things, and also that the people are quite well banked, even though they may be wearing grass skirt and running around, right? But the guy can actually do pretty much everything that we can do, most things that we can do with iBanking, but on the older Nokia-ish phone. Yeah, so that was some of the key insights that I got. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks, TC. Yeah, and I marvel also at the time and dedication that you've also spent, all of you, to dedicating your life in this season to these different social impact causes. And as social entrepreneurs, it may be very in some ways liberating in one hand to have your own enterprise, but at the same time, we as social entrepreneurs know that this is an incredibly arduous and really challenging journey. And one of the biggest challenges as well is really about balancing social impact and financial sustainability. So perhaps, to all the panelists, just briefly share with us, just very briefly, what is impact to you, briefly? And then also share with us, how do you balance this two different things at the same time?
Right. I think the word impact, it's a very broad term, because if you have a handphone, right, which is a smartphone, which is a disruptive technology, that's impact as well. You're changing the way people work, right? When we have like a laptop transition from a computer, that's changing the way people work. That's impact as well. But I think what differentiates between just impact in general versus social impact is how then it brings value to these people beyond just some of the superficial needs, right? So for example, education is a social equalizer, right? Or a mentality, right? When Tsehan was talking about changing the mindset of some of these people and making them more employable, that is lifting these people out of a certain poverty cycle. And when we talk about healthcare, right? Better access to public healthcare, that is also social impact that cuts very deep into some of the basic needs of these people, right? When you talk about these people who do not have even basic access or immunity to some of the problems that is treatable, right? Highly treatable. And for me, I think social impact for water is something very fundamental to human life, right? We all need water to live. And this is where I feel very strongly that, everyone deserves clean water. And I think this period, right, the fact that we're doing this digitally is because of COVID-19. This pandemic has further highlighted the importance of clean water. Just for one of this project that I had in Vanuatu recently, there was a cyclone that hit one of these Pacific islands in Fiji Island. And there was about 200,000 people living in rural areas which got their homes wrecked and basically everything wiped out. And in these places where, where these communities are small and, things like clean water is a luxury, you can see how these diseases spread a lot more rapidly, right? And, normally for young people, if they're sick, it's okay. They can recover from COVID. But many of these people who are the sick, the old, those with pre-existing sick, medical conditions, they become very susceptible to this illness. And this is why, this pandemic itself has highlighted how important water is, and it's how important it is for us not to forsake it, even during peacetime, right? Because it is the infrastructure that we have during peacetime that will allow us to tide through some of these more difficult times during a crisis. And this is why, we are continuing to develop, to deploy these solutions, working with these NGOs to deploy these solutions. And yeah, I think one other aspect of a social business is the business aspect, it's the enterprising aspect of things. And I'm pretty sure this is where a lot of people are curious about how do you actually maintain viable while making better technology, making better innovation, right? And for us, it is very important, right? So we work with philanthropic arms from time to time to raise funds so that these communities can get access to newer technologies, without having to worry about some of these financial woes. We also work with governmental organizations that's looking for alternative solutions, right? So in a sense, we are also hoping to disrupt how some of the current models of water provision is being done. And, that itself is about finding that market demand, you making use of market-driven forces to actually, bring in a new technology, to bring in more innovative ways of, providing clean water. So for us, we are constantly looking at new opportunities, right? And finding both social and commercial contracts to keep the company sustainable. So that way, we can remain viable while creating social impact.
Got
So I
you.
hope I'm able to provide a good idea of what a social enterprise is.
Got you. Thanks, Chunky. Chihan or Tianchang?
Tianchang, you want to go first?
Okay, I'll try I'll probably come in as an engineer because actually just on this question of balancing impact and financial viability, right? My strength in the technicals actually was quite a big weakness because I didn't differentiate between engineering a drone and engineering a business machinery, which actually requires two very big different paradigms. So, I mean, how we find money, right? Basically, it's like, how do we find money to keep doing this sustainably over time? I think like there was this time I reverse engineered the email of an Irish billionaire that owns the telecoms in Papua New Guinea. But because my paradigms around engineering a business machinery wasn't well formed enough, I wasn't ready to engage him or his team meaningfully. Or I kind of was too hard on, I was too fixated on wanting to use the tech rather than being open to what may be the other approaches to the same issue or the same impact. I remember I had another sitting with another billionaire character, and he actually warned me that your rotary wing, which I was quite hard on the first year, rotary wing drones will not work out. You should consider fixed wing. But I couldn't take that counsel because I was just way too focused on trying to solve a problem with one given solution. So I kind of had to, over the years, kind of really beef up what does it mean to engineer a business machinery which borrows a lot from that domain. Yeah.
Got you. Thanks for sharing so openly too. We learn from our failures oftentimes and we try to not repeat those same challenges. Chihan, how about you share a little bit about how you balance social impact and financial impact?
I think it's balancing. I think there's not going to be like a state where there's perfect balance, just like work-life balance. I I think it depends on what is the mission? Like why was the company set up in the first place? And to me, setting up the mission and then understanding the impact that you wish to create, I think there is a part where your where the intended beneficiaries or clients, etc., right, have to be identified. And to me, social impact comes from identifying a group of beneficiaries or a group of clients or people that use your product that have been excluded from the typical market. And Muhammad Yunus did that really well by saying that, I'm going to provide loans to people who have no collateral. I'm going to provide loans to women only, and I'm going to lend to groups of women. So that will totally change the paradigm. But they were, as women in Bangladesh, totally excluded from, the typical banking, commercial banking infrastructure. In Bagosphere's case, we're looking at disenfranchised young people who have no access to college, who have no access to the connections that might get them a job, and of course the education and the skills for them to be competing with talents that have the ability to go to really good schools, get really good education. So we define our impact as helping young people who does not have these resources and are disconnected to be connected to to services and people be to have the ability to find good jobs. We are both. Bagosphere is both a for-profit and non-profit. So we're really trying to balance. We're always balancing, but really we don't see it as whether is it a non-profit or for-profit. I think the best, I would say, metaphor that I can think about is a zebra. You know how typical startups and venture capital, we like to think about unicorns, right? A company is worth $1 billion, and you kind of measure success based on how much money you're worth. I think for the organizations in this group and Bagosphere, I can't say for the rest of you, but I'm thinking in terms of zebras. Like I think there is this ability for us to be much more, how I call it, collaborative and mutualistic. Like this is not a zero-sum game. The problems that Chongti and TC are solving are, and education and Bagosphere is interconnected, right? And this, I think the pandemic has shown us that the problems are, all these problems are interconnected. And so we have to work together. And for us, the focus is not on being $1 billion or getting $1 billion valuation. Right? The focus is the mission. The focus is solving the problem. In our case, it's youth unemployment. And same point I was talking to Audrey before this call that if the focus is that, then whether we use philanthropy or venture capital or all sorts of mechanisms that we find in the marketplace, these kind of all these are just tools, right, for us to get to where we want to be. I think it's been said that to finance the solutions for the UN SDG goals or UN SDGs require trillions of philanthropic dollars, trillions. But in the philanthropic market is only billions in size. So there's no way just to rely on philanthropy to solve the world's biggest challenges. In fact, so we are forced, in a sense, to look into the capital markets. So I do hope in the future, Singapore and the region would give birth to organizations and social organizations that are really focused on not getting $1 billion revenue, but to be able to improve the lives of 1 billion people. And I think that's, to me, the difference, right, between a company that is a unicorn versus a company that maybe is a zebra.
Mm. Very, very thoughtful. Thanks for that, Shahan. Yeah, I really resonate with that because, with the affluence and the amount of wealth, that we have as a society, and seeing how our friends and our peers and some of the the countries that are struggling to get access to basic needs, you wonder at times too, like, how can our friends live like that? And I when I hear all of you speak, it's really about responding with the best possible approach with like your gifts and talents. So it's very encouraging. I mean, I'm also inspired listening to all of you, and I see questions coming in. So thank you so much, dear audience. And we just encourage more questions to come on as well, as we will take just a couple more questions with the panelists, and then we'll go into a session of Q&A as well. And just listening to all of you today, young people who have so much ahead of you too, what are some of the hopes and dreams that you see? And I think, Shahan, you spoke about it, right? Rather than billion-dollar companies, but impacting like billions of people, very exponential in nature. What are some of your hopes and dreams as founders of the social innovations that you've embarked on?
Yeah, so when it comes to change, like what Zihan has said, is it's very multifactorial, right? It's not as if I change water today, they will become more employable, or if if you just improve one aspect of the life, it wouldn't change everything, right? Um, for us at Water Room, right, what we are trying to do first is to improve the life and living conditions of these people, right? We want to create a more fair playing ground, such that children and families, fathers, can go to work. They don't have to worry about missing schools. You don't have to worry about constantly footing like heavy medical bills because they are falling sick, right? So that is kind of the first layer. But ultimately, it's about the livelihood as well, right? You can't just make sure that they are able to have clean water and that's it, right? That's where it's about creating employment opportunities, right? When they're healthier, they can be more productive at work. When they're healthier, children can go to school. They don't have to miss classes. And for mothers, right, they can spare more of their free time to do side labor, or even to take up a job so that they can provide for their families. So ultimately, it's this transformation from life living to livelihood, to improving their livelihood. And at Water Room, I think one of our core purpose is to be able to drive that engine, right? That drive that engine of productivity, drive the engine of hope, right? So when they can have their basic needs met out, right, they can see beyond what's the next level, right, where they can move to, right? So it's creating this sense of progression, right, where they can move up the societal ladder and they can be able to contribute more, right, to their families, to the economy, and it's with that ultimately you can improve their social economic status, and they'll be able to have a better life, right? And our role over here is to be able to, for those who can't stand up by themselves, to handhold them a little bit so that they can be able to stand up on their legs, and then they becoming, the heroes of their fate, right? And masters of their fate, right? And the heroes within their own community. So that's ultimately what we want to do. We want to be a partner to be able to move them up that social ladder.
Perfect, thanks, Chongti. Tian Chang, your hopes and dreams for Yona and the work that you're doing?
Well, I mean, one of the, so we actually have two core tenets. Well, we have three, but two of it is very dear to me. Deploying technology for peace and comfort. So my hope is that when people see a Yona bird coming down on their village, they associate it not as a cargo cult phenomenon, but that they know that because this comes, my children stop dying. And that they know this is actually run not just by Singaporeans, but it's by their own people who were trained in that process. I think that brings me to the other next level thing, right, which is this dream of being able to democratize technology in a meaningful way. And I think, I'm not sure if I'm putting this clearly, but it's like if it comes a day where I can open up enough of my tech, right, such that I don't have to build it for them, that they can take it and carry with it, and I consult for them, and they take and run with it. Just as how so many big companies around, I mean, in the Valley especially, they've opened up their frameworks that now you have waves of like AI companies that came out. All that began because Google came out opened up their TensorFlow. I was a big beneficiary all through my undergrad years of open source technology, especially with 3D printing as well. So I guess one of the hopes is that, yeah, technology will be really democratized, and that would come in really well when they also have empathy and the ability to listen. Yeah, so I guess that would be some of my hopes and dreams.
Thanks, TC. And back to you, Chihan, your hopes and dreams.
Well, two thoughts here. First is, first hope is, we have to humanize the future of work. And the work that I'm doing with my team daily is trying to make this future of work less scary. It's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of worries of whether I can get a job, whether my salary is going to be enough. And I think it's fundamental to, again, going back to the word human, right? It's fundamental to being human. And today I just read some news article that there is this AI that's able to generate essays and text. And you can't tell whether it's from an AI. So, technology is going to come and there's going to be some disruption, but I think fundamentally we need to develop our human skills. So my hope is that people, that we can help those disadvantaged, those who might not have good education, to adapt and to pick up the necessary skills. We see that in Singapore as well. The very big concern certainly is for the rest of the region. Thailand is registering about 25% unemployment. Philippines about 17%. Vietnam is the highest for the last few years. So we're going to see a lot of suffering, a lot of challenges that these people are going to face. But I think that, the hope is that human skills is not something to get. It's something that we already have. We just forgot. And I think it's rediscovering what makes us human that is going to bring us forward in this AI machine-enabled world. So that's number one. Number two is a bit more on the ecosystem side of it. I think we need to inculcate the next generation of leaders to kind of think about how they can be entrepreneurs in the future. Young people especially, who have a lot of passion, and to think about how they can bring about change in their own communities. We see there are a lot of hindrances and barriers, whether it's in Singapore or other countries. So my hope is that we'll be able to hopefully inspire some of these younger people to take up the mantle.
Brilliant. So this is a really good conversation for us right now to segue into some of the questions. And thank you so much, Kelly, for asking this question. It's a really good one. To all the panelists, you have had such fascinating journeys. Do you think Singapore has a good environment for social entrepreneurs? Chihan, would you like to start?
Well, we are entrepreneurs here, so I guess yes, there's some. There's I think going back to my earlier point, right? On the ecosystem, one thing that struck me was a conversation I had with MOE about a few months ago, and I learned from them that when Singapore took on the ASEAN chair a few years back, and they did a survey with many Singaporeans in universities, so university students, and they did surveys in other ASEAN countries as well. And there was one question in the survey that asked, use one word to describe ASEAN, the ASEAN countries. I use one word to describe, and this was asked to Singaporean youth, right? Singaporean university students. Use one word to describe the rest of the region, right? All the countries in Southeast Asia. And unfortunately, that word came out to be useless. And that really took a lot of people by surprise. MOE obviously was very disturbed by that. It is a very strong word, right? And for young people in Singapore to say that, it doesn't bode very well, I think for us. And so I think this links to a bit to Kelly's question, right? Like, what is this pessimism? Is a bit pessimism? Is a little bit of even I'm not sure what to call it, but there's a bit of a disrespect as well. Like what is this? These countries are not helping Singapore. I don't know what they're thinking about. So I'm not saying that this is apparent for all young people in Singapore, but I think there could be, for example, a better discussion about how the region can be a source of good jobs and employment, that careers could span in Singapore into the region, and not just look in the region at Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand as these places you can do OCIP, or places where I can help some poor people in some village, and teach English, etc. Which I know is the common experience among all of us. But I think the discussion can be much more into the space of what are real opportunities, what are career making opportunities in the region. I think that would be very strategic for us as a small country in a very big place.
Got it. Okay. We see a lot of questions streaming in, and I really want to take the opportunity to answer all of them. Maybe either TC or Chong T, just very briefly share with us, do you think Singapore is a good environment for social entrepreneurs?
If your environment is NUS Enterprise, it's definitely a good environment. I remember Prof. Wong, like when in my practicum grant, he was like frowning and raising his eyebrows, like, what in the world are you talking? But yet they really released that seed money for me to start. Then I mean engineering lab that year in 17, a lot of labs were closing down. So I ended up like Karanguni go and collect all the furniture, because as drone guy, right, you need tables, you need space. So I kind of start to colonize the hangar, and Charlene was like, then I give her the guilty puppy eyes, and then they eventually let me have the space on the contact on the like I have to agree to share with everybody, which I was more than happy to. So if your environment is NUS Enterprise, it's awesome. It's been such an awesome experience being incubated with them. Yeah.
Perfect. And Chong T, just brief words.
Yeah, I was a fellow colonizers of all the working spaces,
Okay.
right? And also exploiting TC's for most of our machining work. So I would agree that NUS Enterprise increasingly in the universities, they are a good place, right, to kind of bring your ideas to life. I think on the broader spectrum, I think Singapore is increasingly doing a lot of this. So I think NUS is one of them. DBS, SIF, right? Lian Foundation. I mean, there are people who are also trying to push the boundaries when it comes to social businesses and concepts. So I think if you are interested, right, do look up for these organizations and see what are resources out there to explore. Because I feel that a lot of times, before I started, I don't really know how to start. But the thing is that there is a growing ecosystem out there, right? So whether you're interested in business or a social business, to go out there and talk to these people. I think on the broadest, perspective on whether Singapore is a good environment, or whether what we can do as young people is really to have discourse. I think this discourse, the social political discourse, social economical discourse between people is very important. And it's through discussions, right? These coffee talks, these chats that you have with your friends about these issues, that we can increase the involvement and participation for these issues. And if we are indifferent about it, we don't talk about it, it's very hard to start, right? And I think at 54 years of age right now for Singapore, I think we're at this stage where we should mature beyond just maybe following a certain set of rules and thinking of the 5 C's all the time, but really to think about what we can do on an individual basis, right? To be able to contribute. So that's kind of my very short answer to a very deep question.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks, Chong T. I'm going to hold you right there because I think Jordan's question is a really good one, and I would love for you to respond to that. Do you think it's effective to have social businesses to be driven by MNCs in the BOP market, given they have the scalability to do it? Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I know that you also take a very co-creation approach to working with governments and organizations. What's your thoughts?
Yeah. I think it is important to include these players as key players for scalability's sake, right? So I think as a business, very importantly is to be able to leverage on some of these network and resources, right? And to find common grounds to work with these people. Ultimately, our system is driven by a very capitalistic, market-driven kind of state, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as much as sometimes, there are exploitative acts being done by certain MNCs, right? It's important to understand where we can collaborate and where we can work with them for. So one of the advantages of these bigger companies is normally in terms of resources, right? And in terms of their network, right? So tapping on this thing as a small player is very important. And also, I think, if you're in the social enterprise space or in some of like humanitarian space, it is hard to be, say, devoid or to completely be estranged from the CSR aspect of things. Oh, don't remove me, please. But I do think that it is important to be able to leverage on these resources and be open to it. I think most importantly is to be able to find value, right? And create that shared value between your organizations and the system itself to be able to bring out the impact.
Brilliant. Yep, I think the shared value approach is really one of the future. So to answer that question directly, I think MNCs has a place. There is a place for MNCs, but if MNCs begin to collaborate with social entrepreneurs who spend time on the ground, I think that the social impact and the change that we see could be much more scalable and transformational in the long run. So perhaps I'm going to direct this next question to Tian Chang. How do you balance between being a social enterprise and trying to run a business? Do you ever find that you need to compromise on your goals of being a social enterprise? Perhaps Tian Chang and Zhihan, if you can speak briefly to this as well.
I guess in Papua New Guinea, I have to use an account like a parable to explain it. Right? In Papua New Guinea, we found our first beneficiary. Unfortunately, in Papua New Guinea, most of the healthcare is very decentralized. What I mean by that is it's literally just either a mission hospital or autonomous hospitals running the shop because the government is just not doing the job largely. And so we found them first. We said that we would deliver some things, but yet over the process of that business, like when you try to do lead development, you realize that they don't really have enough budget coming in to sustain the scale of cargo drones that is needed. So that was a bit of a tension, and as well as the local regulators being not very supportive of engaging us or changing the regulation to be a bit more friendly towards this. Whereas if I were to take a pure business approach, then I would just go for provinces and countries that has that budget and as well as forward-thinking ability when it comes to cargo drones, short-circuiting the building of certain road networks, that we will just go straight into that, just like how we jumped to mobile and we skipped the whole landline phase. Not that it's a total replacement, but in cargo drones case, it really needs a very forward-thinking leader of a country. Yeah, so that's probably one of the conundrums that we face or what we have faced.
Got you. Thanks for sharing that. Zhihan, do you ever feel you have to compromise on your goal?
It's an ongoing challenge all the time, right? Because we could have grown much faster if we just chosen students that could pay us, right? The fact that we are training people who are farmers, tricycle drivers, single mothers, informal workers, is the fact is that they don't have they don't have a lot of savings, they don't have income to pay for a good quality education. Even with us, like even though we drive the price down and try to cut a lot of unnecessary things, there's still fundamentally certain costs that you got to cover. So we really struggle, right? But I think I would switch the word from balancing to more of a, how do you call it? This is something like a flywheel, right? The fact that we actually been running very successful training programs, getting people employment. About 2-3 years ago, after many years of doing that, 2-3 years ago, we started to launch our B2B corporate programs. So in our B2B programs, we were able to attract companies that would pay us directly to run upskilling, reskilling training programs, and we were able to do that because they saw that our programs with the B2C with our students was something that they need. They needed their teams and they needed their people to be better communicators, to better team workers, etc. And so it's all interconnected, right? The fact that we're able to be profitable last year was the fact that we were very successful running our programs that were impacting a lot of people, getting people jobs. And now we are leveraging both philanthropy and earn revenue from companies, right, to scale up even faster.
Perfect. Thanks, Shahan. Yeah, and I think Ivy mentioned a very good question, right, around the COVID-19 pandemic. And I know that many of us have been displaced from traveling into the region. So maybe just briefly to Chong T, perhaps, how has the pandemic actually impacted your work so far?
Oh yeah, immensely so. In fact, I already have my tickets to flying down to Philippines originally during March period. Got cancelled. A lot of my groundwork so far has been working with partners on the ground, right? So because the thing about trust, right? It's very difficult. So like I have a piece of technology that can solve the problem, right? So we can engineer that. That's not a problem, but it's very hard to engineer human connection, right? That sense of togetherness, that sense of trust. Why should I change from drinking boiling water or scooping water from a well to your technology? Like, why do I need this foreign, also chemical thing, as they would say, to intervene with our life? And education is such a big aspect of water, right? And for us, not being able to travel down did push a lot of our plans back, right? And during the lockdown period, and even now, right, we are spending a lot of time to digitalize our processes, right? So how can we make, for example, a demo session, right, digital? How can we virtualize it? So we have been doing a lot of digital materials. In fact, we spent about 2 months, making all this like tutorials and wash video seminars into digital formats, right? So we can still share it to their WhatsApp, we can share it with our distributors who can then still disseminate the information.
Yeah.
And also during this period, it's also about finding the available channels that we can still reach out to these people. So for example, we found a way to deliver our solutions and train up the people even during this period, which is kind of important because the work can't stop. Right?
Brilliant.
So yeah.
It sounds like a great opportunity to really rethink new ways to create collaborations and also to kind of like, as Tian Chang said earlier, right, hand the product in some ways back into the hands of the community, where success would look like, from a systems change standpoint. All right, so we're gonna just take this other question from Jacqueline. This is a really good one. Do you feel discouraged and want to give up on your dreams? How do you overcome these obstacles and succeed? What can you advise other young people who want to pursue similar paths? TC, shall I invite you?
I think it's a maybe an advice is that like we are not saviors, because like there's so many things that needs to go right for a country to work well. I remember talking to a doctor who has been in Yunnan for many years, and one of the things this doctor told me is that because of the lack of discipline in their culture, he actually had to reject treatment, right, for TB patients, because he know if I treat him, he's going to feel well and then stop coming and develop drug-resistant TB and start being a vector for the rest of the community, which will make his work harder later on. And so I think this constant reminder that I am not a savior. I need to find that nice pace. Don't get too uptight when things don't go your way, and just be really hopeful and don't be too cynical too fast. Yeah, there's always that one guy out there that really will understand you and open the door too. Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, that was one of my learnings too, really to take the approach of humility, to listen, and really at the end of the day, the people that we serve, we learn so much from them. So in fact, I feel like oftentimes, we have to be grateful for them trusting us and wanting us to be a part of their journey. And I'll probably direct this last question, because I know we're almost at the 5-minute mark now. It's getting really exciting because there's so many questions coming. To Chihan, where do you go to network and find like-minded people to encourage each other and come up with new ideas and to go further in your respective endeavors?
Well, I think just look around, depends on whether you're a student, you're maybe in your mid-career already and you're trying to shift. Um, I think yeah, just go into the immediate circles that you might see would be a starting point. Like I think if I'm a student, um, there are the various groups to join and just discover things, and then slowly um, through them, then you discover more networks, etc. Right? I think now that the world's so interconnected with LinkedIn and so many of these online groups out there, it's a bit. I think yes, it's a bit harder also, right? Like it's a bit hard to make connections. Um, I had this luxury personally of being part of a global network called Sandbox, where we were part of this global group of I call maybe entrepreneurs and people who do things out of the box, and so that gave me a lot of energy. Now I'm part of the Ashoka network, which is a group of social entrepreneurs, fellows. So I draw a lot of strength from the work that I'm doing as well. So I think it's just taking the step to even reach out individually to people that you admire, like this interning for. So actually, right now I have a Singaporean lady. She's in her mid-30s, and she's undergoing this career shift. And she reached out to me. She didn't know me at all. Like she reached out to me through LinkedIn and asked me whether I could intern at Bargosphere for 3 months. And she's now actually in a
Oh,
checkout meeting with me, with
wow.
us, right? And yeah, so I think the opportunities are there. I just have to go and grab it.
Perfect. Thank you. I'm going to just squeeze in this one last question, and I promise everybody it's the absolute last. This is from Wilbur. What could government or society do to encourage more social entrepreneurship? Chong T, would you like to kickstart? You talked a bit about this course, which I think is extremely important.
Right. Well, you got to look at the three sectors, right? Public, private. I think all different arms have their part to play, right? There's a tripartite relationship with all these different sectors, right? I think with the dawn of this pandemic, which might last for a much longer time, people are having discussion about how big government might have a big role to play, especially in developed economies, to make sure that opportunities are more equal, that we are able to create a safety net for these people. But I think it can't just be from the government, right? And it can't just be from the private sectors, because the private sectors need to take care of their margins, they need to take care of their profits, right? So I think it's very important to retrospectively look into ourselves as well as what we can do. What is this responsibility as consumers, as citizens, that we can play in this bigger picture of what we call social progress, right? It's only when us as people care about the public as in general, care about these social issues, that we are able to create a paradigm shift, right, in the entire way we look at impact, in the entire way we look at social issues. So I think ultimately, when there's a bottom-up drive, together with a top-down kind of like support for these things, I believe that's where real change will happen. We see this happening. I'm pretty sure TC and Zhihan, we see this happening in some of these developing countries, where we see people from like non-profit sectors, government sectors, private sectors coming together. And I think I myself is also a beneficiary of well-meaning people from all these places coming together. But if you want to create a paradigm shift, it really takes all parties. And I think that's something that we need to take note of, right? How we can really change this is by partnerships with all these different sectors and parties.
Got you.
Audrey, can I just jump in very quickly?
Yes, please.
Just very short, right? I think government should support the SME sector. I think it's not just about social entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship. I keep it to these two things distinct. I think it's about encouraging more entrepreneurship, and particularly supporting the SMEs is something that I think will be very helpful, because it's one thing to start a company, it's another thing to sustain and grow and to scale.
Absolutely.
And I think that's the
Absolutely.
biggest gap that we're facing.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, our dear panelists, for your time. And finally, perhaps just to round it off, today for us. One short sentence, perhaps, around your aspirations for the future that we see.
Human. Yeah, that's for me.
Brilliant.
Universal access to clean drinking water.
Tech for peace and comfort, that will be mine. And democratizing tech, putting it back into the hands of the common man.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, panelists. Really appreciate all your sharing today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Audrey.
How about you, Audrey? What's your one word? Or
Yeah.
what's your one sentence?
Wow. Financial resilience and emotional resilience for the next generations to come.
Oh, powerful.
All right. Right. Thank you, panel speakers, for the insightful sharing. I hope you have been moved and inspired by their beliefs and innovation, and of course, business acumen. The entrepreneurship programs in NUS are all about empowering students with entrepreneurial exposures and experiences in various industries, imparting the skill sets they need to become change makers of the future. We do so by providing resources and support that they need to create their own startups. The NUS entrepreneurship programs are not only training up entrepreneurs, but also raising up individuals to do good for others and to contribute back to the society. Well, excuse me. If you have any unanswered questions or thought of new questions for our speakers and moderator, please contact us at the address shown on the screen. We will be sending you all the relevant links after the event, including a link to the webinar recording, which will be active for 3 days only. Last but not least, please participate in the survey on today's session by scanning the QR code on your screen right now. Thank you for participating in today's webinar. We hope to see you again next time. Thank you.